I find it really interesting how the JQ movement, this awakening so called to the JQs, and how it's such a big thing, especially on X, how you see so much of this JQ talk and this big enlightenment that people seem to have towards it. Now, I want to bring some attention to what this gentleman said here. I follow this guy on X. He's got a lot of good things to say. Definitely suggest following him. The reason you're allowed to talk about Israel controlling the world is because they don't. Excuse me. They're just middle management in the hierarchy and a proxy for the house with real power. You're going after the nerdy IT guy, not even the CEO, while ignoring the chairman of the board. And who's the chairman? The Jesuits, who've been scapegoating quote-unquote Jews for centuries. Try calling out the Jesuits and see what happens to your reach. Now, I totally agree with what he's saying, because the second people start going off on the JQ, like, I totally get why they say that, and they're not completely wrong, but it's misleading. It's not completely accurate, and especially when you start yapping about the Jews control this, the Jews, that you don't sound credible. It's like me, the Illuminati. Like, you don't sound credible when you start going off. And when you start saying, the Jews, it's the Jews, oh my God, man, you're isolating a particular group of people who have nothing to do with this. Because I know a lot of people who are Jewish who have nothing to do with this. And when you say, oh, it's the Jews, and I know Jews who even would say, oh, it is the Jews. The Jews are bad people. Because essentially the people who started and controlled Israel and still operate there are bad people. But your average everyday Israeli who's brainwashed, just like your average everyday American who's completely a walking, talking robot and just reiterating what politicians and media say. Because we're so disconnected from who we are as people and the real history of the world and who runs the world, we constantly look at certain groups of people, such as maybe the Jews, as they control everything. And would you look at them, right? A lot of them have money. The Israelis are the wealthiest nationality in the United States. There's a whole lot of suspicion that you can point to towards Israel. But I think this is a proxy, just like he was saying, for those with real power. And in fact, I don't even think I know. Because for you to say it's the Jews and for you to actually think it's the Jews is a very surface level way of thinking. And I'm sorry to tell you, because I know a lot of people who know truth constantly go to this narrative of it's the Jews, man, that are just say it's the Jews when you start talking about the dark occult. And you know what? He's right when he says the Jesuits have been scapegoating. And I've talked about this before, that they use Jew or Rothschild, Rockefeller, or a lot of these people, most of these people in government, in really high positions of power in the world, who are Israeli, who call themselves Jews, are not really Jews. They are actually just Satanists, right? So, sure, you can even make the argument that Jews and Satanists, or these people Zionists, I'm talking more so. You see, when people are talking about Jews control the world, I think they're more so talking about Zionists. But most Jews, I would say, are Zionists, right? So again, you're still isolating to a certain group of people that really have nothing to do with the powers that be. You see, when you say Jesuits, you're isolating a specific group of people who are actually contributing to the detriment of not only the U.S., but society and the world as a whole. And they scapegoat, right? So that way, when you question Rothschild, when you question the Federal Reserve, because I've gotten this before, that's a Jewish conspiracy theory. Well, it's convenient that they label themselves as Jews now, because now if you start questioning the Federal Reserve, if you start questioning certain people, if you start questioning things, or an event that happened, almost 100 years ago, then people are going to say, you're anti-Semitic. You're just an anti-Semite. You just don't like Jews. And all these things. You see, there's always a way that, this is why people who are awake aren't really awake, because they keep falling for traps. You keep falling for traps, political traps. The anti-Semite shit, that's all a political thing. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, all an artificially created political scheme. It's a Hegelian dialectic. It's a problem, reaction, solution. It's a method of division. It's a way the powers that be get what they want. Look at 9/11. That's a perfect example of problem reaction solution, right? They destroy the towers. They blame Osama bin Laden, Al Qaeda, and all the Muslims. We go to war. We kill millions of people who had nothing to do with the attack. And we take over their banking system, their oil fields, and the whole 9 yards that the USA typically likes to do. And because back then, people fell for the scam. They just didn't say it was Jews. They could have said it was anyone. They could have said it was Australia that did it. And Americans would be okay with going to war with Australia. So what I'm trying to tell you is the powers that be have created conspiracies within conspiracy theories. I think it's so interesting how, like, 2024 has seemed to be the year where there was this enlightenment. All these even big people like Candace Owens, right? Or the guy I was talking about in my previous video, Myron Gaines. And all these people talking about Jews. The Fight Back podcast with Jake Shield, how he's really big on exposing the Jews now. People, you got to ask yourselves, man. You really got to ask yourself, who is in charge of this world? And in fact, I'll tell you who's in charge of this world if you really want to know. You better go look in a mirror if you want to know who's in charge of this world. Because that's who's in charge. It's yourself. You look at the mirror because all of us, when one of us is suffering, we all collectively suffer because of our ignorance. That's why so many people in the world suffer. And some people don't. Some people, like myself, honestly, has lived a good life. Was born in the USA, was born in a good family, and I've lived a good life thus far. But there's a lot of people out there, not even just physically suffering, but mentally suffering. And that's what 99% of people are suffering from is confusion, cognitive dissonance, and being disconnected from the truth.